Welcome to episode 3 of your Intro to Recording. This one will take us from acoustic recording on cylinder and disc to stereophonic recording. You know, the history of recording is a history of formats on the record side and the playback side. So on the pro side and on the consumer side. And we have something to learn from each one of those formats. So I thought what we do is let's listen to some things. Last week we listened briefly to an Edison cylinder. So today we're going to listen to a couple of discs. Disc technology replaced the cylinder in the early 1900s. These guys were just a little easier to store from the consumer point of view. And also they were, because of their shape and size and the way the motors were built to turn the turntable, they were a little more stable. So Mr. Edison stole an idea from Mr. Berliner and started making discs. We're going to listen to an Edison disc right now. A Victor disc, Victor Recording Studios, which was one of Edison's competitors. And it was made in 1917. The tune is a George M. Cohan tune written during World War I called Over There. And it was made with a cone and a stylus, similar to what you saw last week, but pressed to a disc and played back on this kind of stylus right here, this little bad boy right here, which we eventually called a needle. This one is steel. So anyway, here is a recording played on a Decca circa 1920 portable, no electricity, wind up. Here we go. And so on and so on. I'd like you to compare what you just heard, which was made totally acoustically, no electronics involved at all from recording or playback, to this next recording, which is from 17 or 18 years later, actually 1931. This is Duke Ellington's orchestra, performing his tune Rockin' in Rhythm. And this one was actually made after this bad boy was invented, the microphone. And the microphone, as you will learn from another assignment, was able to generate electrical current in order to cut the disc, which made some improvements happen. But listen to the difference with this recording, even though it's still being played back without electronics. The recording was made with a mic, but the playback is still on a 1920s machine, which people would have had. People would have had in those days. just a little sample of that. I think you can hear some differences, and I'm going to let you play this back a few times so that you can articulate what those differences really are. And notice, let your ears give you some information. Well, that disc format, without a whole lot of changes, endured for a very long time, for about 80 years, actually. And we were making very high-end disc recordings right up until, in fact, people still do now. It's sort of retro. It's coming back. But the golden age began in the 50s with stereo recordings, which you will also read about. So I'm going to play you, instead of that turntable, here is an electronic turntable. This is a Technics, Modern Technics turntable. It has, instead of a steel stylus, it has a diamond stylus. The disc is, instead of being made out of a ceramic type or rosin material, it's made of PVC. It's made of plastic, basically. This recording made in about 1957, but I think you'll hear some differences here too, so pay attention to this one. So, I know you hear differences there as well. Well, you should. The technology advanced, but the technique was the same. It was a physical object scraping against another physical object, reading little dots and, not dots, reading little grooves and bumps on a surface as it was pulled past a stylus. That recording, incidentally, where is it? I have given you a handout, or at least a reference, to this recording, which included a lot of technical information in its liner notes. This was de rigueur of the times. In the early 50s, when stereo became the new craze, people didn't really know how it worked or why it worked or what they should be listening for, and so the record companies made sure you had some sort of information about this, and the earlier stereo recordings had much technical information included in the liner notes. Okay, so what actually happened during that period of time, the format, the playback format essentially remained the same, but the recording techniques changed in terms of utilization of a thing called a microphone and amplifiers. You'll learn more about this as you do the rest of the assignment, and we will discuss it a little bit further and get into a little further depth later on, but you will want to play those samples back a couple of times and maybe research some of your own on the internet, the differences between recordings that were made acoustically and recordings that were made with microphones, and then recordings that were made in the from the 1950s, late 50s and through the 60s up into even the present day on vinyl, to get your ears accustomed to hearing the differences. Now, I'll give you a little hint about this as you're listening. You know that frequency and amplitude are important. You know that frequency is measured in hertz and amplitude is measured in dB. You know that frequency that can be heard by the human ear exists somewhere between 20 hertz or 20 vibrations per second and 20,000 vibrations per second, 20 kilohertz. And that your listening level will be from 0 dB, which is basically your threshold of hearing when things are extremely soft, in terms of dB, right? Amplitude, speaking amplitude now, to in excess of 85 dB or so in the healthy range. Once you get above 90 or so, you're starting to do permanent damage, which I think you know already. So the two factors to listen for here are, first of all, frequencies. Can you hear the highs and the lows in terms of pitch? Frequency is pitch. Very high. Listen for the hi-hat cymbal, for example, in the Ellington. Okay. And can you hear very high and low frequencies? High, soprano, cymbals, things like that. Bass. Can you hear differences in dynamic range? The difference between loud and soft. How did that change? How did that playback change? What was the microphone able to do to enhance some of that? So here's a trick question that you can ponder. What has wider dynamic range, the rock band or the symphony orchestra? You may have to look up what dynamic range means. But if you do, that's a good thing and something else that you'll learn. Okay, well, that's enough of a little teaser for right now. You have plenty to listen to between now and next time, and a thought-provoking assignment, I think. When we get together next time, it's all about tape. So I will see you then.